the video.
So there's a few things we have to know about temperature in a snow scene. Anything that is white, meaning white fabric, snow, rocks, whatever, if they're white, a white object is cooler nearest us, and it gets warmer and grayer as it actually goes back away from us. Everything else in temperature goes from warm to cool, so they kind of pass by one another in the mid-ground. You have to be careful about making it cool enough in the foreground. Now, I adjusted the photograph quite a bit because it was a very bright, overcast day, which has a tendency of washing things out. So as you can see in the foreground, hopefully on the photo that I sent you, it's a little bit darker, it's a little bit cooler, and as it goes back towards the barn, it gets actually a little bit lighter because it's picking up a lot of light from the sky up above. So when anything is lit up above on an object, usually the horizontal plane like this is lighter, and as we go up on an angle, it gets a little bit darker till it hits vertical. So it's something that you have to take note at as far as the values are concerned. But the sky is a little bit lighter than the foreground here, and then the light on the snow here is much lighter than the sky. Actually, the barn has kind of a yellowish cast to it. So it's a white barn, but the white has a lot of color in it. So what I'm going to, okay, so I'm going to wet the sky just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and start with some of the cobalt blue here. So I'm taking a little bit of cobalt blue here, like so, and I'm going to take a little bit of raw sienna, not too much, and I want to gray the sky just a little bit so that we have a value just about like this here. And I'm going to start by painting the sky. It's going to have a little bit of yellow in it, which the sky does actually. I'm going to paint around the barn here, and I'm going to come down to the trees. So I'm going to be very careful about painting around the barn here at this point. As we get down towards the horizon line, we're going to get a little bit warmer. So I'm going to paint up the rest of the sky. And I'm allowing the brush strokes to show up here.
So you know your view of the picture is the barn is on the right now. So I think you're mirrored.
Let me continue what I'm doing here for a minute. We come down towards horizon line. I'm adding a little bit of the raw sienna, and that will help tie in the barn. And I had just a little bit of water up here. Now I have a little bit of white showing up in here, a tint of it, but I'm not worried about that. And I'm going to go in with a little bit smaller brush here, and I'm going to paint the tree line in the background. And it has a little bit of green in it, has a little bit of blue in it, and some of the burnt sienna. So we're going to end up with kind of a look like that to start with. And I'm going to add a little bit more green to it and a touch of the ultramarine. So we're getting into something like that. Now, the trees in the background are some pine trees, some hardwoods. I'm not concerned about the actual color of these because I want to bring in some other colors that we're going to be using later on. And I'm trying to make the tree line move a little bit more than what's in the photograph, because the photograph is kind of straight line, easy going. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the body of the barn, and I'm going to take some raw sienna mixed in with a little bit of the cobalt blue instead of the cobalt blue, and a little bit of raw sienna, and it's going to have a little bit of warmth to it. A little bit more raw sienna. And in this particular thing, I'm changing the color a little bit more than I ordinarily would in a small space. As I come down towards the bottom, I'm taking a little bit more burnt sienna with the raw sienna, and I'm going to paint that stone foundation. And then I'm going to bring this right down to here. And I just let it run into one another. I'm not worried about the roof at all at this point, but I'm going to paint a little bit on the side of the barn that has shadow side of the barn here, because the light's coming from the left-hand side here. And then I'm going to add a little bit of the cobalt blue so it goes into shadow a little bit more. Then I'm going to carry this along through here a little bit, keeping the snow a little bit warmer in the background. And I'm going to allow the just to fall in here a little bit, attach it to the barn. And then through the foreground, up in here, I'm using a lot of water. I'm going to take the cobalt blue with a little bit of the green, not too much, just a little bit more. And I am going to paint this foreground. It's kind of got a grayish look to it. And then I'm going to come out here with a much lighter value of that, but a little bit warmer as we hit the foreground here. And I'm going to cast a little bit of a shadow back here to make it a little bit more dramatic. And then I'll tone the roof of the barn down a little bit. So basically everything that I've done, I've covered just about 95%. There's only parts of white showing here and there in the foreground here, just little spots, and that will help make it sparkle a little bit more. So up in the sky, I wetted just a little bit at the very top. I added cobalt blue and raw sienna together. As I came down, because you have to think of the sky as a dome, it gets lighter and grayer, and I add a little bit more warmth into the horizon, and then various greens and browns and blues in the background here, yellowish green on the barn, a little bit more burnt sienna on the base of the, and then I came down through here and across through here with a little bit of the cobalt blue and a little bit of the sap green. So that what it does is it compresses the focal point a little bit more by making this a little bit darker. So you can go ahead and start, and I'll be watching what you're doing. The sky is going to be nice. The sky is going to be nice, light, and airy. I'm not going to do too much more with it. So try to keep it on the lighter side, lots of water.
Well, what color did you use for the top of the barn?
In the front here,
Yeah,
I used the raw sienna with just a touch of the cobalt blue, and I mean just a pinpoint of it, just to bring it down to a little bit grayer, because the raw sienna is a grayed down yellow, and when you add a little bit of another color to it, it's going to be grayed down automatically. It may look like it has a little bit more brown in it, but it doesn't. It's kind of a yellowish green at this point, but it's predominantly yellow in the front of the barn here. Then I just took a little bit of more cobalt blue and ran it down the side there to make sure that that recedes. And then down in the lower part of like a quarter of the barn is the stone foundation of it. But I made it very light and airy because remember, this is a white object. It's not going to have a lot of value to it. A little bit of detail, but not a lot of value. Jim, try not to overbrush it.
okay.
I have a lot of blue in on on the left side of the barn there, which is the north side. So it's not receiving too much light, but it's getting a lot of reflection from the snow.
The roof is blue too here?
I did a very light tint of the cobalt blue and the raw sienna up there just to tone it down. Because right now, if you squint down and take a look at the picture, you'll see that the roof is a little bit lighter than the snow out in front. Now, there's going to be a lot more small additives to the snow out front to make it move a little bit more. Because right now it has a tendency of looking like it's washed out. And that's what happens when you have too much light. But everything I put in is very light except for some of the background trees back here. I will probably not be going back into the sky at all. So I'm going to start at the background trees and come forward again. Because I want that sky as simple as possible.
Gail, can I let you take a look at mine? This is Phyllis.
Yeah. Okay, that's where you want to stop.
Okay. Thank you.
Lisa Hollihan, that's fine. You're doing good. Barb, how are you doing?
Barberry.
Yes, Barb Berry.
Let me show you just a second. I think I'm too dark.
A little bit, but I think you'll get a little bit of character out of that for sure. You have a snowstorm coming in, but leave it alone.
All right. I got a long way to go here.
Just remember that it takes time to understand what the watercolor does, not to chase the watercolor. Leave it set and roam on the paper. And don't overhandle it. Keep it always simple. Lily, you have an intruder.
He just made me vegetable juice.
That's nice.
Die.
Really? What's he making for lunch?
Oh, I'm afraid nothing. But I'm very happy with the vegetable juice.
Yeah, good. Does he deliver?
Yeah. Oh, maybe you're a little far away.
Yeah, it's a couple time zones.
Yeah. I'm very lucky.
Good. Linda, can I see what you're doing? Linda Nicholson? See where we're at? Okay, wonderful. Good. And Lisa Paraday, are you here?
I'm here, Dale.
Okay. All right, good. Yep, you're fine. Looks like everybody's doing well.
Dale, the bottom of the barn to the left is what color?
I had a little bit of raw sienna and a little bit more of the cobalt blue. It's not, and it's very light, but it's a little bit cooler over in here than it is up front here. It's the same two colors, but reversed in its mix, where the cobalt blue is a little bit more predominant. And make sure that that darker area down front here kind of remains a little bit soft. I sprayed a little bit of water so that it just keeps a soft edge, because you always want to keep your edges as soft as you can for as long as you can, and then we sharpen things up where they need to be sharpened up. All right, I am going to start with the tree line in the background to start with, and I'm going to kind of reshape it a little bit. There's a number of trees back there that are a little bit warmer but grayer, so I'm taking a burnt sienna and I mixed it right in with the green that I had. I like to cross mix a lot of colors on the palette itself, so I have a color that's kind of like this. And I'm going to very carefully, I'm going to go over by the barn here. And I got to look, see where the edge is at. It's right there. And I'm going to add a little bit more burnt sienna to that mixture. And I'm handling it very casually. In fact, I'm dry brushing a lot of it over here. I don't want any attention to the background here, because a good background is one that stays back. You don't want it coming forward. Probably won't do anything with this over here again. Now I'm going to go towards the left side of the barn, and I'm going to take the sap green, a little bit of ultramarine blue, and I'm going to take a little bit more time, as we do in the second wash, and I'm going to dry brush this in here to start. This will begin to pull the barn out, and I'm going to alternate different colors through the background here near the barn, just to make it a little bit more interesting. So I added a little bit more burnt sienna to this right in here. And I'm going to dry brush the top of these trees here so they have a tendency of looking a little bit more soft. Then I'm going to add a little bit more of the green to it and some of the ultramarine blue. So we're getting colors that are a little bit richer in color just past what I painted. So I have some green here, and I have some pine trees that come up. And I'm very casually putting them in, kind of swiping from side to side. Then I'm going to add a little bit more burnt sienna and raw sienna to this. And add a little bit of distinction with some individual trees here on top. We don't see the individuality of the trees down towards the bottom. And as I go away from the barn, I'm going to simplify it, because the more I put into it, your eye will attract going across, which you don't want to do that. So I'm keeping it a little bit on the simpler side, changing the value of the temperature just a little bit. And then I'm cooling it down as it goes away from the barn here. And it kind of goes uphill just a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of the cobalt blue on the toothbrush. So we got a little bit like that. And I'm going to come real close to the paper, and I'm going to spray this with a little bit of cobalt blue. So I'm so close to the paper that it's not going to go anywhere else but right in here. Now, out in front of that is a patch of rough looking trees and some grasses and so forth. And it comes kind of off the barn here a little bit. So I'm going to put in some tree lines here, and they kind of disappear up into this here. They really don't show all that much. And I'm going to take some raw sienna with that, and I'm going to gray it down with a little bit of the blue over there. And I'm going to carry this, and I'm following this ridge here. This ridge goes up and down, and it goes away. So that will show a little bit of change of the landscape terrain. And then it carries back up a little bit more, a few more trees in here. And I'm being extremely casual about this, because the more I try to define things, the more it's going to come forward on me, and I really want it to stay back. Then I'm going to carry it right on up into here in a way, and then I'm going to add a little bit more down here. And I'm adding a little bit more than what the photograph is doing, but I need to adjust things. And then over here I have a little bit of the grassiness coming up through the snow here. I want to do it at this point, and this will show a little bit of change of terrain over here. And I'll take the toothbrush with a little bit of the same color, and I'm going to add it a little bit over here. And I want to strengthen a little bit in here a little bit, and just a little bit over in here. So I'm seeing different things here, and I'm seeing in the foreground here a lot more of this high grass coming up. Many times I'll spray the watercolor on here and then manipulate it, because you get a little bit more of a random pattern to it rather than trying to paint the pattern. So again, I'm taking my time. I don't want to jump ahead too far on you folks, because I know how I felt as a student when the teacher was off in another universe and I'm still back in the previous one. So I'm adding a little bit of these tufts of grass coming up in this particular area. And I'm holding the toothbrush very close, and I'm just using the very end right here. So I'm not trying to get it overworked. I'm adding a little bit of flavoring. And then what I'll do is I'll go back and take the smaller brush and manipulate a few pieces of grass in here. I don't want anything too distinctive, but yet I need to have these act as a secondary character to the foreground here. And I'm kind of making it as light as I can. I can always go back in and embellish it further, but I don't need to do that right now. There's a couple little tufts of grass in here, like so. I want to make the bottoms of these a little bit darker, like that. And I need to see the rest of the, okay, that's what that looks like. And I'm going to bring this over here a little bit. And then I want to add a little bit more in the in-between part to help fill this in just a little bit. So I'm adding extra things in here that I feel that are needed. And then up near the barn, there's always a little grass growing out of the snow near the barn here. That's all I'm going to do for this. So all I painted was from here through here, this area following the terrain of the snow, and then into the foreground here with a little bit of the tufts of grass that will be developed later. And I really haven't gone back to the water that much. It's not that dirty. So I'm using more pigment than I'm using water in many cases. This is really, the foreground and alongside the barn is really to get the landscape adjusted to how the terrain is moving. That's good, Jim. Lisa, that's good. Holohan, that's where you want to be. And Lisa Paraday, you're good.
Yay.
We always, remember, just always try to make things simpler to more complicated. Never start off with complicated washes at the beginning.
Can I show you mine, Barbary?
Okay, good.
What do I need to do?
Leave it alone for now.
All right,
You got where you're supposed to be.
all right.
How we all doing? Looks like we're getting there.
Yes, thank you.
Hold yours up, Lily, if you would.
I'm sorry. Oh, sure.
I could see you and your beautiful ceiling, but not the painting. Okay, good. That's where you want to be.
Okay, thank you.
That's good, Jim. Linda Nicholson, how are you doing? Okay, great. That's good. Just add your grasses in the foreground and so forth.
Okay.
Dale, when you did the trees on that, like just the bottoms of the trees in the foreground, or not the foreground, but in the front of the background. What, did you try to make a brown?
I have a different combination of a little bit of the burnt sienna, the raw sienna, a small touch of the cobalt blue. And as I wandered away from the barn here, I made it lighter and airier.
Okay, so it's okay if it's a little warm.
Yes, because those grasses up there are warm. What I did initially from the photograph is I enhanced it a little bit more to get a little bit better movement than what's in the photograph. So that's what the artist's job is to do, is to make it look better. When I was a student, I was having enough problem trying to get down what was just there.
Yeah, I get that.
Jim, you want to try to keep your brush a little bit drier. Tap it off on the paper towel. You want these out in front, nice, light, airy, not pronounced too much, because we can pronounce where we need to do it later. And then break the line up a little bit more so all of this is not connected in the foreground. So don't allow all the grasses to be connected. When you feel you're done, that's where you put your brush down.
What were we supposed to do with the toothbrush?
What was that again, Phyllis?
Cobalt blue on the toothbrush, where does it go?
I added a little bit back up in here and over here. Very small little flecks up in here. It was just meant to give a little bit of flavoring to it. That's all.
Okay. And did you use the toothbrush on the grass at all?
Yes, I did. A little bit here and there. Then I manipulated it with my smaller brush.
Yeah, this is really bad. I should have just left the toothbrush out.
Well, that's what you have paper towels for.
Oh my.
Hi Dale, it's Julie. I just
Hi.
joined in late.
Hi, Julie. Yeah, I got your message this morning.
Sorry about that. So let me just ask a quick question. So the blue you use for your wash, is that cobalt or aqua?
That is cobalt. I
Okay,
use
and then,
cobalt blue with a little bit of raw sienna up in the sky here.
okay,
As I came down, I started using a tad more raw sienna to get this to fall back. It gets grayed down, a little bit yellower towards the horizon line. Then I added in the tree line here, making sure it moves uphill.
okay,
And then I added the bluish wash over here and the yellow wash here with a little bit of the cobalt blue. And
okay,
down in the foreground, I added the cobalt blue because it's always cooler nearest us in a snow scene, or anything that's white is cooler nearest us. And
okay.
it gets warmer as it goes away.
And then your trees, did you use sap green in there or blue? And then-
Sap green, burnt sienna, cobalt blue, and a touch of ultramarine. And as I came across here, I made it darker towards the barn on both sides, but different. And then I gave it a lighter value as it came out through here.
Okay,
And the second thing I added was out in front here to show the terrain of the land moving up and then down in here. So there's going to be a number of things I'm going to add in the foreground. Not too much, but there'll be a few things.
okay, great. All right, don't wait for me. Just keep going.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the kneaded eraser. I never use a pearl eraser. It's too abrasive. And I'm going to get rid of this line up in here as best I can. So I'm erasing all the pencil lines, which you can do to a great extent because these pencil lines will be bothersome to the rest of the painting later on up on the roof. And you should be able to get rid of most of it, if not all of it. So now that it is kind of just the light against the sky itself. So I'm going to go ahead and start painting again, if that's all right with everybody. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Now, looking at what's in my monitor, what's on the paper here, and what the photograph is telling us, there's a couple little changes I'm going to make. I'm going to take the cobalt blue mixed in with a little bit of what's on my palette over here, and I'm taking a little bit of that with a lot of water, and I'm going to give the sky a little bit of character, I decided. Not too much. And I'm taking just a damp brush at this point, and I'm going to add a few descriptive things in here. And I'm going to take my 1-inch flat brush and I'm going to soften it out. And it's a very subtle manipulation of the sky. I don't want to overdo things. And I want to give the sky just a tad more character, not too much. And that way it kind of pushes the values in on the barn a little bit more. But this is a very small change to the top part of the sky up here. Then what I'm going to do is take a little bit of raw sienna, very, very light with the 1-inch brush. And I'm going to warm this up just a little bit more down towards the bottom. And then I'm going to take the damp brush and kind of blend it in, drying it off on the paper towel. And that gives the sky just a little bit more character than what's in the photograph. Not a whole lot, but just a little bit more. Now, at that point, I'm going to take just the wet or damp brush and I'm going to pull out just a few little tops of what is feeling like clouds up in here, not too much. And I'm slightly scrubbing the paper, not a whole lot. And that gives the sky a little bit more character than what the photograph has. Now, at that point, I'm going to go back into the barn. And the barn needs some description. So I'm starting off with the raw sienna, a little bit of the cobalt blue. So I'm getting kind of a warmish greenish gray. And I'm going to dry the brush off on the paper towel. And I'm going to give this a little bit of character in here. Not a lot, but it's just something to start what I feel needs to be added to the barn. And then I'm going to go off to the furthest side here. We're going to make this a little bit more dramatic than what's in the photograph. And I'll straighten out the roof a little bit later. Then we're going to come down to the base of the barn, and I'm mixing up burnt sienna and a lot of raw sienna. So we're getting this color here. And I'm going to add some character down here in a dry brush manner so it looks a little bit rougher. And I don't want it looking even, I don't want it looking perfect, because these are all field stones that have been put in from probably the property, I'm sure. And I'm drying the brush off. I rinsed it out so I can maneuver and manipulate some of the color that there. And it goes from a little bit darker to lighter back here. So I don't want a lot of things happening to this. Then I'm going to take a little bit of the green, a slight bit, and I'm going to dry the brush off a lot. And I'm going to carefully put in the feeling of those clappered boards that are in here just a little bit, and I'll manipulate it later. But it gives that scrappy look to it. And then with a smaller brush, I am going to go in very carefully with the sap green, the cobalt blue, and a little bit of the burnt sienna. So we're getting a color that's something like this here. And I'm going to be dry brushing this in, so I'm going to tap it off on a paper towel here. And I want to dry brush in the feeling of, I'm going to bring this up closer on my picture, and I'm going to dry brush in of what's showing on the tiles of the roof here. But I don't want to overemphasize it. As it goes back, it's going to be less emphasized.
What colors did you say you used?
I used the sap green, a little bit of the raw sienna, and some cobalt blue.
Thank you.
And it comes down to that final ridge that kind of pops out on this particular barn. And I'll deal with the rest of the roof later. And again, I'm going to go back into the front of the barn here with the stonework, and I'm going to add just a little bit of character to what's going on here with a dry brush. So I'll keep on tapping it off on the paper towel. And I make sure that it changes as it goes across. I do not want the same going from side to side. So I'm going to simplify this as it goes back here. Like so. And I'm going to go up and put the dark that runs along the ridge here. And I mixed up a little bit of the blue with the burnt sienna. Again, I don't want it too dark. And I'm doing this a little bit more on the casual side, just to find how the roof is acting to the shape.
Dale, is that cobalt blue and raw sienna or ultramarine and raw sienna?
What I'm putting underneath here,
Yeah.
it's a little bit of the sap green, a little bit of the cobalt blue.
Okay.
Now the thing with this up here is that there's snow on the roof up here showing, and I've got to show this a little bit more. I'll go back and define it later, but I don't want it to stick out too much. I don't want it to come forward too much. And I'm going to fix the roof here just a little bit by lifting. Straighten out a few things. And at the same time, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to lift out a few lights in the building here. To show those lighter value boards. It's a matter of teasing things in at this point on the barn. I do not want it to stick out too much. minor things at this point. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to manipulate a few of the trees that are right here next to the barn off in the back, and I'm going to lighten them against the dark, and I'll add dark to the top. So all I'm doing is I'm lifting with a damp brush, and I rinse it, pull all the water out, and then I bring it up like so, and I'll finish off the trees as they come up with a smaller brush. So it's the brush is very dry, and this will show light against dark at this point. Then I'm going to go into the windows on the barn just a little bit so I know where things are at before I lose them. And I'm not adding too much dark to it, just enough. And again, I'm being very casual about it. I don't want these holes sticking out from the barn too much at this point. And then I'll add the doors in a little bit. I'm adding a little bit of green to that at this point, and then coming back with a little bit of the burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. Because you don't want these to stick out all that much. And then I put a little bit of a window up here. And then down as the boards change, I'm taking just a damp brush with a little bit of paint on it and signifying where the layers of boards change and so forth. And I'm going to bring some of this down just to give this a little bit more character. Okay, now into the foreground, I am going to darken that cast shadow in the foreground. You notice I haven't even bothered with the trees and so forth. But I need to make this a little bit more dark. I'm going to gray it down with a little bit of raw sienna. And I am going to change the look of the painting a little bit. And I'm making it very rough. It's not that smooth up here, believe it or not, because this is where the plow came in. And I'm going to add little passages of the blue in different areas as we go out, very lightly to signify that there's a crest here of a hill. This comes down a little bit here, so we're going to cast a shadow up in here. So this will give me an idea of how the landscape moves just a little bit more. So I can take a little bit of the raw sienna with the cobalt blue again. And I am going to slightly spray this with water and a little bit of the cobalt blue in certain areas, just to give this a little bit of roughness in the foreground. And then go back and start adding just a little bit more. And I got a little bit more raw sienna in this, and I'm going to tone this down back here and create a little bit more movement up in the foreground. And then back here, I'm going to tone this all down with a little bit of a warmish blue-gray, so that this hill recedes back here. And when I put the trees in on top of all this, which will be the last thing, it will have more of a completed look.
What color is that you're doing right now?
I'm cobalt blue and a little bit of raw sienna. Different combinations of it. And I'm toning it down just ever so slightly, not too much. Okay, so this is where I'm going to end at this point. So what I did is I started off with the barn shingles here to show where it doesn't have any snow on it. And then I started adding more to the front of the barn, not too much to this side. And then I added in the rest of the, which I'll alter as I go through, the rest of the stone work on the bottom. Lifted out these trees, came back in, added more of the blue and a little bit of the raw sienna, and then sculpted a little bit of the landscape here to give a little bit better movement of things.
Dale, how'd you get the gray for the barn?
I used the raw sienna, a little bit of the sap green, and a touch of the cobalt blue, and I added a lot of water. Right now I'm going along and I'm just taking a brush and lightening a few spots here. Not too much though. Jim, you're going a little bit too dark on the front of the barn. Use more water. And Lisa Holohan, you're doing great. That's fine.
Thank you.
And Lisa Paraday, I'm seeing it sideways.
You are?
Yeah. You're actually in vertical mode. Ah, there we go. Okay, you're doing fine. All right, your sky got a little dark on you, which is okay. Can I see
barn
the bottom of the painting I'm not seeing. There we go. You can get some more greens into the background here next to the barn. Some blue greens and greens. And it tails off to nothing as it goes across.
Okay. And would that be with a small brush?
Medium brush. If you feel more comfortable with a small, use that. I had
This
many a
brush,
week.
right?
I had many a weeks like that, so don't feel bad.
This brush?
Hold it up to the camera. Still, I only see your painting, not you, not the
Oh.
brush. There we go. Yeah, that one.
Okay.
Lily, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, you're coming along fine. Good. Jim, you're doing fine. That's better, much better. Linda, how are you doing?
I think okay.
Yep, you're doing fine. Good. I'm fixing my barn a little bit, so don't pay attention to me. Phyllis, how's it working?
I'll show you. It's not quite like yours.
It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be like your painting. Okay. You're getting along. That's good.
I'm going kind of slow.
The background that's off to the right-hand side of the barn here,
Uh-huh.
take your toothbrush with just a little bit of water when it's laying flat, spritz
Okay.
it on that area and pull up so that it gets a little bit lighter here and there. How are we all doing? Pretty good?
It's really fun. Thanks, Dale.
You're the first person that said it's fun.
It's really fun. I love your paintings.
Thank you.
Will you be continuing to teach these classes, I hope?
Yes, I will be.
In fact, you can go to the Palette and Chisel's website.
Oh, they already have the next one?
They have the next 3 up.
I put up 3 more classes as Zoom because we don't know what's going on in Chicago too much. And the route that I have to take to get there is not usually the safest.
Oh, well, that benefits all of us. Thank you.
Well, it benefits me a little bit because I don't have to spend gas money and parking money
And
Oh,
time.
yes.
and time driving and back again. So it's
So
almost
Barbara,
a 3 hours
Beard
round
could-
trip in most cases.
So
Barbara
the
Beard
next,
would be
the
okay
next
for Barbara
session will
Beard to
start
take
up in
it?
the new year on the 7th of January.
Thank you. The same day
Dale-
and time or?
Yeah,
Same time, same station.
Okay.
So Dale, would that be okay for Barbara Berry to take?
Of course.
Okay.
The more practice you do, it's like a musical instrument. You have to practice, practice, and practice. I used to take the backs of my old terrible paintings when in class, cut the painting in half and do small studies 3 nights a week.
Okay.
And I kept on playing with it, and I finally started understanding the water as opposed to the watercolor itself, understanding how it flows, understanding what not to do. The more mistakes I made, the better I got.
Okay.
Mistakes are a good thing. Lisa Holohan, you're doing fine. Linda Nicholson, may I see yours again, please? Wonderful. Your grasses in the foreground need to be a little bit more prominent down here, which I'm going to work on again in this area. I'm going to work those a little bit darker, a little bit more finished looking before I put the trees in.
Okay.
Jim, you're coming along good. You're getting a handle on it now. How are you doing, Julie?
I'm racing through it.
You're doing a pretty good job racing through it, I'd say.
It's a little too, got a little too wet in here.
Okay, well, you're best off to leave it dry, and then you can spritz a little bit of water on there with your toothbrush, and you can lift things to make it a little bit more airy if it's too dark, but you're
Okay.
doing fine.
Okay.
And Lisa Paraday, you're doing good. Now that I'm seeing it right side up, that's good.
Barn would play with.
Okay, we're ready to start again or not?
Yeah. Sure.
Does anybody have a no?
I'm ready too.
Okay, here we go. All right, what I want to do next is I want to finish a few things on the barn, such as some of the windows and such. And I'm going to take a little bit of burnt sienna, some of the ultramarine blue, and I'm getting this kind of darkish brown look to it. Since they're fairly far away, and I'm going to bring this up a little bit closer so I can see it. Since they're fairly far away, they're going to have a little bit of darkness to them, but I'm not going to have real dark because we can't see that much dark. Darks get lighter as they go away from us. So I'm adding just a little bit of detail into the door frame. Not too much, because we don't see that much of the dark as we're going away from it. I mean, we can get real detail with the barn, but I don't think it's all that necessary. And I'm adding a few little descriptive windows along the side there. The other thing that I want to do is I want to add, I take a little bit of that raw sienna and the cobalt blue here that was already on the board, and I want to very softly put in underneath the eave of the barn a little bit of dark coming down so that there's a difference in the value between the vertical wall and that swoop coming down just ever so slightly. And at the same time, I'm going to take a little bit more cobalt blue, and I'm going to add very lightly, and I dry it off on my brush here, a little bit of change in the value of the barn roof, a little bit here and there, so it's not too light. And I mean, I'm adding just a little bit because it's something that we need to show a little bit of change of value on the roof to make it a little bit more interesting. And as it goes back, the lights will get darker, so I'm going to tone the back of the barn roof down ever so slightly. I mean, just a hint, so that the front of the barn comes out, the back of the barn goes back. And at the same time, I'm going to add a little bit more detail to the roof line here with a little bit more dark. And a very, very skinny line, nothing. And I'm not going to do it equally everywhere because I don't like continuous lines. And just for a matter of intensity to pull this out a little bit more, I'm going to add small passages of some of the burnt sienna to show a little bit difference in the barn stonework facing us, and that will pull us out a little bit more. Then very lightly I'm going to add a little bit back in here, not too much, because I need that to recede. Then the last thing on the front of the barn, I've taken the color that I had here, added a little bit of green that was over here, and I'm going to dry the brush off and add just a little bit more character to the front of the barn. So I'm drying it off here, and I'm looking at some of the individual boards coming down. There's two different layers here of barnwood, and this is just to give it a little bit more character here and there, not too much, and a little bit more on top here, and just a little bit dry brushing on the bottom there, just to give that a little bit of character. Then the window that I put up on top here, I'm going to add a little bit of darkness to it, not too much, because I don't want it sticking out. You get a dark hole in the middle of that light, you're not going to be looking at it the way we need to. Too much contrast otherwise. Now down in the foreground with the grasses before we start with the trees. And the reason why I'm jumping around is that timing in watercolor is everything. So I'm allowing things to dry, what I did up here, come down, and then I'll put the trees over it in a minute. So I'm going to very carefully dry brush these trees, and so I'm tapping lots of the pigment off. And I want to get a little bit more character of these weeds down here. So initially what I'm doing is I'm just allowing the brush to touch the board to get this lightness of dry brushing going on. And I'm putting a few of the topses on the grass, the top. I can speak. It's close to Friday. And it's really a little bit out in front of the barn that I'm going to emphasize the grass. As it goes off this way, it's going to be less. Because remember, the more detail that you put in on something equally everywhere, it will flatten out the painting, it'll make it too busy. And I know you can't see it, but I am mixing in a few other colors here and there. I'm going to take a little bit of the cobalt blue and run some cast shadows for the trees, which is not that important. And I'm adding some cobalt blue in on the grasses up front. Like I said, if you do too much, it's going to be too busy. And I'm adding dashes and lines here and there down in the front here, just as something would be poking up through the snow, and a little bit more raw sienna in some areas, and then we'll start with the trees. Okay, now I am using a little bit smaller brush. This is a number 3 round, and I'll feel that I can get some better control. I'm going to be using these two brushes. This is a 6 round, this is a 3 round. So you can see the difference between them. So I'm going to start off with the larger brush, and I am going to start painting, I'm gonna use a little bit of the ultramarine blue with the burnt sienna. So we're getting kind of a brownish dark like this over here, not like this over here. And I dry the brush off a little bit, not too much. And I'm gonna start at the very bottom. And I'm just bringing it up on one brush stroke. I'm gonna worry about the branches later.
What color is that?
That is the ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna. So I started off with this color here, and I dragged it across to get more of a brownish dark. And I'm going to be adding other colors to it here and there. And I'm just simply bringing the trees up very casually. Now you notice at the bottom here, I am allowing it to start and stop at different intervals. This tree I want to bring down, make it a little bit thicker at the bottom here. So I'm bringing that forward so you get a little bit of distance with this, that some are in front of the others. I'll soften the bottom a little bit. And then I'm going to bring up some other trees here, closer together, intertwined with one another. And you're going right across the barn. This is the scary part. Can't tell you how many structures I've ruined over the years. But I'm not allowing it to bother me. It's just one continuous movement. Don't lift your brush up. Don't try to sketch with it. It's a continuous movement. And it's just a mass of trees in the foreground. And I'm alternating the color a little bit, more brown, a little bit more blue as I go. I'll worry about the branches later. And then I'm going to leave an open hole here. And I'm going to put in a little bit larger tree over here. Starting right about here. And I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to move it in different directions and then up. Very carefully and very fast, very deliberate. And if some are lighter than others, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't want to attract the eye with every tree you're putting in anyways. You don't want them being the same. So I'm going back and I'm looking at, okay, I need to bring one down here because I want them moving up and down through this ridge here. And then there's a few small trees, which I'm going to use a little bit more cobalt blue with these over here on the right side. And I'll worry about the branches later. That's a whole different ball of wax. And then these trees are going to be a little bit smaller, more sapling looking. So I'm not going to put a lot of emphasis on this, but the trees are kind of hiding the barn a little bit from the road. Now, what I want to do at this point is go back and make some descriptive darks in here and there. And I'm going to put in one fence post right here. So I'm using the broad side of the brush. And there's another fence post right over here. And I'm allowing it to show a little bit of a curve here. This comes in closer, this is further back. So I'm always looking at the bottoms of things. And then there's I'm going to put 3 in because 3 is better than 2. And this one I'm going to hide in the grasses over here, so it looks like it's going back a little bit. I'm going to darken up this a little bit, bring it out in front so it doesn't end up being the same as the fence post. I'm not going to put the branches on until you get this far. in the painting. I'm going to put a little lean-to post on this here. And one down lower over here. Something to hold the fence up. Okay, that's where I'm going to stop at this point so that you can get the trees in and the fence, and then we'll add the branches later on. Julie, how are you going there? Pretty good? That's pretty darn good for catching up, young lady. Michelle, are you still drawing or are you painting?
I'm painting too,
Okay, can I see it?
if I have to.
You have to. Not bad. Good.
Okay.
You caught up pretty well.
It's more of a spring scene though, it's not a winter scene.
Well, okay, we'll go with that. Unfortunately, this barn collapsed last winter
Yeah, that's too
under the
bad.
heavy snow. It's over 100 years old.
It didn't look like it was in that bad of shape.
It wasn't when I took this picture, but the following year they had some holes in the roof, and the roof is everything. And it just finally gave in.
So that picture was taken when Dad was still alive.
Yep.
So it had to be like 2012 or 13.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Oh yeah, that's been a while.
Everybody's doing a really nice job. A little bit different interpretation here and there, but they're all holding up together. Okay, that's better. All right, that's good.
Thank you.
Very good.
Haven't wrecked it yet.
Good night. Barbara Berry,
Yes,
can you see me?
I'm looking for you. There you are. Okay. All right, not bad. You're getting there.
More on the left, right? Correct?
Yeah, a little bit more on the left. Don't forget a few of those fence posts.
Well, I was thinking I put 2 of them in there, but
You really need 3. And I
Okay.
have them spaced differently also.
okay. Point out the third one, please. Is that
The
at the
third
edge of
one
the
is
barn?
right here.
Oh,
And I
okay.
have them going in a line like this, tilting at different angles
Okay.
so that they're not looking the same. It's always better with an odd number than even numbers when you're painting.
Okay.
It's more pleasant to the eye. How you doing, Phyllis? I can't hear you, Phyllis.
I almost decided this wasn't worth continuing, but I've been working on the barn.
All right. That's coming along fine. That's nice.
Yeah, it's coming on better than I thought.
See?
I know. You were right. I was wrong.
Again.
Once again.
I used to have a teacher that said, he says, I only made a mistake once, and that's when I thought I made a mistake. Don't be afraid to make those sweeping movements going vertically up with a little bit of angle and so forth with the trees. Just one big swoop up. And they'll all turn out a little bit different, which is what you want.
You used a round brush on those, right?
Yes, I did. I used a number 6 round. If you feel comfortable with a smaller one, that's fine. But the idea is to get a little bit different thickness and lightness to them. And some of them, as they came up, they had a dry brush look so that they're not the same all the way up.
Right.
You want to keep them having a variety of movements.
Hey, Dal,
Yeah.
the color that you used for the shadow that creates the very front, the down in the forefront.
This down here?
Yeah.
I used
What?
a cobalt blue with, just a pinpoint of the raw sienna. And there was also, I mixed just a pinpoint of the sap green into it. I'm going to still work on the foreground here in the trees.
It just looks so warm.
Yeah, what?
It looks really warm, like
No, it's quite cool.
Okay.
Okay, here's orange.
But the predominant was the cobalt blue.
Okay.
There's a couple adjustments that need to be made here and there. But I'm always standing back, looking at the painting, what needs to be adjusted, fixed, whatever the case may be, before I move to the next step. That's good, Jim. Keep going. Bring those trees all the way to the top of the paper in one swift movement. All right, we got a little bit short on time here. I'm going to go ahead if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. There's a couple things I see that need to be changed. One is the very top of the roof. We have to have the sky a little bit darker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the ultramarine or the cobalt blue and a little bit of the ultramarine blue, not too much, and a touch of the raw sienna, just to get a little bit of a grayness going. And I'm going to have a lot of water on this, so it's going to go very quick. And if I put too much down, I will be pulling it up, but I'm going to go right across the top of the roof here. You see how that pulls that out? Then I'm going to take just a damp brush and kind of maneuver it out into the rest of the sky here, and then soften the rest of it so that it looks like part of the sky and not a blob up above it. So I'm going to take my brush there and maneuver this around just a little bit. And you can see on how the barn came out up in here a little bit better. Let me just finish this off just a little bit on this side. And it's just a matter of kind of fuzzing it out as we go along here. But that brought the top of the barn out. Now, the foreground, before we go into the trees, I'm going to use a little bit more of the cobalt blue in the same pigment I mixed for the sky, but it's a little bit stronger. And I'm going to go along and I'm going to emphasize a few of the blues up in front here. This got a little bit too rich, so we soften that up. And this to give the snow a little bit more dimension into the foreground. Have a cast shadow off the tree there. And it'll give it a little bit better shape. And I'm going to add a few more passages out here to strengthen that. Like so, and then off over here, and a little bit out here, not too much, just a few quick, so you can see on how this comes forward now a little bit better. And the last thing on the barn that I feel needs attention, so I'm going to take some burnt sienna mixed up with the cobalt blue. This side needs to be a little bit stronger in color up towards the front here. And a little bit more over here. That seems like it turns the corner better now. Now, the very last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some fairly colorful lights with my smallest round. It's nothing too profound, but I'm going to start with putting in, this is the scary part, some of the branches that are up in here to finish this off. and every once in a while altering a few of the branches coming up. And I'm making them very light and airy, so I'm drying the brush off quite a bit on this. And I'm going to do a couple things a little bit differently, but this gets an idea of filling in the sky a little bit more. I'm going to make some of the passages in front of the barn a little bit darker so that they pull out away from the barn. So the barn starts to hide between or behind those tree branches and trees. And you don't have to do every tree. I'm doing them so it looks like it's the illusion of every tree having some sort of busyness to them, but not too much. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add very light spray with the toothbrush, like this right up in here, if you can see that. And I'm going to add just a little bit of character up in the trees here. Some of the leaves may be still holding on a little bit. Add a little bit more burnt sienna to it. This will give a little bit of color up in the trees here. And act as a little bit of a foil for the barn itself, pulling some of that color up front from the foundation. And I could take a dry brush and I can soften some of these. And then add a few leaves here and there. Bless you.
Thank you.
But it gives a little bit of solidarity to the trees, just a little bit more in the sky here. Something a little bit different than just the photograph, because a lot of leaves do hang on in some cases.
Oh, excuse me.
Bless you. I want to strengthen this tree here a little bit. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to soften all these with a paper towel so they're not too strong. This tree needs to be strengthened. This one needs to be strengthened a little bit. And it's adding as much as you feel it needs, but I'm doing it very, very slowly so I don't overdo it. And I'm going to take a wet brush here and reverse the value of this tree trunk right here so it pulls away from the background, light against dark. And I'm going to do the same thing here a little bit, so we can start to see value changes here and there.
Dale, I had a question. When you used the
Yes.
paper towel in the trees, was it to wipe away
I was softening some of the
spray?
The spray.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to go in and add a few prominent leaves up in here, not too much.
And what color is that?
That is the burnt sienna with the cobalt blue in it.
And it allows me to put the pattern in after I sprayed it up there, and that gives me that random feeling that I was kind of looking for. That, as I said before, we don't usually paint too randomly as people. We like to have everything kind of too even, too calculated looking. Couple leaves over here. And a couple of crows over here flying in. It's all these little end details that sometimes will pull the painting together. So I'm adding some darker cobalt blue passages here and there to what's going on to give it some accent in the foreground. And a little bit deeper look to the crevices and so forth. Some of it's very subtle, some of it's a little bit more pronounced. Let's see what it looks like without the tape on it now.
Dale, in your supply list, you had mentioned, I don't know if it was a white gouache or a...
Yes, I'm going to do that now.
Okay.
I didn't forget. I just need to see what this looks like here a little bit. And what I do, I already added the white gouache to my palette back over here. Clean the palette up a little bit. And I'm going to take the white gouache, just a little bit of it on the toothbrush, mix it in on the board here. Like so. And I'm going to add a little bit of the raw sienna to it because I don't want the snow. I never use straight white paint. I always add color to it.
Raise it up a little higher so they can see what it
And I'm going to, so I have a little bit of raw sienna in this. It's not straight white. Let me show you what the difference is. This is straight white. You can see the difference there. You can see that this is not straight white. And I'm going to add just a little bit of snow in the air. Not too much. And I'm flicking the toothbrush just a little bit. This will add a little bit different dimension to it. There are times where I do add gouache to a painting, but it's all planned. It's not something that I use to fix things with. But this adds a little bit of light blowy snow, whatever the case may be. You can't see it everywhere, but it will show up on the darker spaces. Now I add a little bit more water so you can see it a little bit better. Once in a while I used to find my studio students using it to fix a mistake. It's not what it's there for. So we have a little bit of snow going on. I don't know if you can see that. I'll put it up close here.
It's beautiful, Dale.
There's a little bit of snow here and there.
Just gorgeous.
Wow, that looks great.
Thank you. But it's a much different subject than some of the other ones that I do. It's light, airy. It doesn't have huge value changes in large areas. The darkest thing is this post right here and these, and then this over here. But I didn't want the trees to, as in the photograph, be too dark. because then they start interrupting the view. So I made them lighter.
It's like 100% more beautiful than the photograph. It's really super.
That's my aim. It doesn't always come out that way, though.
It's gorgeous.
Oh, great.
It's gorgeous.
It is just amazing.
Thank you.
Man,
And I always see little
gorgeous.
things that I need to adjust. You know, I can have a painting in the studio for 2-3 days and decide what else I have to do with it. And I'm adding just a few little accents here up on the roof. And I think I'm just going to leave it alone.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Alan, this is Julie. This is
Yes.
number 1, and I'll probably do a number 2.
Just a minute. I got to see the iPad here. Okay. All right, that's not bad.
Yeah.
Watch for your trees being too evenly separated in the foreground.
Oh, okay,
You
zigzag
have
them.
to stagger them in thickness and in the spacing between them.
Okay.
But-
All right, thank you. Have a nice holiday.
You too. You did a great catch up today.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Michelle, how did you do?
Coming along, I'll show you.
Yep. You did pretty good for a catch up of drawing it and putting it together.
Thanks.
Good. And Lisa Paraday, how did you do?
I fell behind.
Okay, well, that's all right. You can still finish it. You got a great start.
Yeah, for sure.
You're doing fine.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Lily, can I see yours?
Yes, it was so fun.
All right, you did well. The barn got a little bit darker, but that's okay. Who's to know that
Yeah.
the barn wasn't that dark? But
Thank
that's good.
you. Thank you. This was so fun. I'll see you next week. Oh,
Okay,
no.
you have a great Thanksgiving.
You too.
Or next week we're
Bye.
off, remember. Next
Bye,
week we're not
everybody.
here.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you in
Happy
2 weeks.
Thanksgiving. I'm going to go too.
So can we sign up for that class now, for the January class?
I believe you can.
Yeah, just go to the Palette and Chisel website and they have a registration button.
Yeah,
Oh,
Palette
okay.
Chisel has a registration button. It should be fine.
Okay.
Jim, you're doing well. You're
Yeah,
controlling
thank
it
you.
so much more now.
Yeah, I'll continue working on this. I kind of fell behind too. So
Okay,
anyways, thanks very much. Have a nice Thanksgiving.
you too.
All right.
Linda,
Can I?
that's good. Bring the trees up to the top of the paper a little bit more
Okay,
on the left-hand side. But that came out nice.
okay, I will do that. I'm gonna check out too. Happy Thanksgiving.
You too.
Can I show you mine, Barbara? Barbara?
You sure can. All right. You need to practice your dry brushing with the grasses in here a little bit more.
How do you
make
do
them-
that?
Make them groups of them and then separate them a little bit, then more groups. You have them all separated too evenly.
So I would do that. How would my, how would my brush go with that?
Well,
How would I,
you take the brush after you dry it off on the paper towel and you
Okay.
drag it on its side.
oh, okay, okay,
Try that.
okay, I'll work on that.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll do that.
Have a great
I have-
Thanksgiving.
I have 2 weeks to work on it, so.
There you go.
Happy Thanksgiving. Have fun up north.
Okay, we will.
Your painting is unbelievable, so thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.